Alright, welcome to the STAMPSCAPES replay. This is going to be using a piece of 8 by 10.5 inch piece of holographic cardstock. Okay, now I've been using the holographic printable vinyls of late, which are very accepting of a wide variety of inks, but this type of non-porous surface here, it's best that you use it with the Brilliance black ink if you're going to do this type of blending of ink on the surface. You can stamp something in your archival inks like a STAZON or something like that for your impressions, but if you want to move ink around on this type of surface, you're going to want something that's malleable after it's been applied, but most importantly can dry on this surface, okay? While this ink can dry on this surface, you'll still need to either heat set or let it air dry, which won't take too long. But you'll also need to spray seal this type of ink onto the surface to make it adhere to the surface, because it won't inherently do that, okay? Alright, so that being said, what I'm doing right here is I'm going for the I don't know, I call it Northern Lights type of look. In terms of creating these kind of curtains of light in the scene. But this particular holographic cardstock, there's a link to it in the description section underneath this video if you're interested. But this one has these kind of these striations of hard contrasts of, oh, I call it light columns or something like that. So they're inherently in the paper itself, but I'm doing these additional kind of negative space areas to create these hanging areas of light within the scene to give it a little bit of structure. And there you can see where I've applied that black ink on there, okay? Now this surface is so loud that it does show through the ink that I'm applying. Now naturally it's going to show through the more translucent layers that I'm applying, the lighter layers, thinner layers, I should say. And in the more opaque layers, you don't see quite as much of the paper showing through. Okay, now we want this characteristic of the paper to be an integral part of the scene, or the major part of the scene, so we don't want to block it all off, but we do want to kind of tame it to bring it into the scenic stamping kind of format here. Otherwise, it's just going to dominate anything that you might stamp within the scene, okay? So, that being said, I'll be going with some, a little bit more of a silhouette type of imagery after this background has been established here. Okay, so I'm applying this around the perimeter of the scene, a lot in the four corners of this card, if we can call it a card at this large size. But that's going to kind of frame off the scene, and it kind of, I'm not going to say equalizes, but it negates the hard edges of this, you know, the 90-degree angles of this rectangle here, you know, the format of the card. So kind of rounding it off softens the overall composition. That's why they have kind of that strong vignette in something like portrait photography or something like that. But what it also does is it contains the composition so that it'll bring the attention, the viewer's attention, into the scene. Okay, now this ink hasn't dried yet. Okay, it doesn't dry real fast on this type of real non-porous surface here. So what I've done is I've applied this ink. It's not sopping wet or anything like that, but you can still go into it and brush this more kind of feathery type of reverse type of mark into the scene. So it's a subtractive mark. When I'm going in with the paintbrush, this is a clean paintbrush, there's no ink on it. But what I'm doing is I'm removing some of that black ink that has been applied and kind of feathering the edges of it so it'll give it a softer look. Doing this alone, the subtractive process doesn't really do it for me. So what I do after I do the subtractive process is I go back in and I blend it a little bit more with some of the black ink. So you can do this In this cycle of addition and subtraction, no matter, as many times as you think you need to do it, okay? I might have done it 3 times in the past, but I'm getting a little bit more used to it, and I think I was using a better brush this time around, so it gave me a nice feathered look. Going back in and kind of cleaning up that little area of the light pillars with that paper towel. And here I'm going in with some Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White in the splatter painting type of technique. Giving some stars to the scene. And what this does, those stars kind of give that area up there a stability. There's something that's not moving in the sky. And I think that this type of scene needs it, okay? Because everything is just so crazy, colorful, dominant, huge contrasts in the scene. And these stars kind of stabilize everything up there. Okay, now I added a little bit too much of the Dr. Martin, so I'm going back over with my black ink and I'm darkening some of these stars. Some of them are getting blacked out completely with this, the Brilliance Black again, but a lot of them are a little bit more grayscale. And these grayscale stars, these little white dots now that are now gray, they look a little bit farther back because they're not as white. So you add some additional depth into the scene with the use of some additional pigment ink. Alright, so going in with this large Art Foamies version of the Lakeside Cove here. And again, I'm stamping it with the Brilliance ink. If you're using rubber stamps on this, you could go in with a STAMPSCAPES or something like that for a lot more stability and it'll stick. But on the Art Foamies, I don't want to use a fast-drying solvent ink such as a STAMPSCAPES because I think it would fill in the pores of the foam too much. Okay, now watch this right here. So do you see where that image stands out against the background and the solid trees, but down on those rocks, that light shows right through them and the patterning of it, okay? So I need to resolve that with some additional shading on the tops of those rocks. Now, that impression is not dry. It's going to be very, very wet, so I'm going to go in here with a heat gun and I'll dry some of that ink just to get it a little bit more stable before I start blending in some more ink over the top of it. Okay, so I've dried it a little bit, and it was fairly firm. It wasn't completely dry, so going over with this cotton ball was probably smearing some of that ink around, but that's fine because most of the image was still stable, so it doesn't look like there's just this smear of ink, okay? But I am blending some of it in, so it's giving it more of a grayscale and giving more substance and visual weight to those rocks. In other words, I'm just adding more shadow to those rocks. Still trying to keep the tops of the rocks a little bit lighter than the bottom parts of them because I want to give this illusion of this kind of top shading in here. And see, those rocks look a little bit more dimensional, and putting a little bit of ink over the top of it blocks off some of that light in the background, some of that holographic patterning in there. And again, when you anchor your imagery down, not just on holographic papers, but on anything, when you anchor them down with some additional shading, it really gives them that visual weight and opacity that says that, the sky or something like that isn't just showing right through a rock or something like that, a tree or anything. Okay, adding in some foreground right here in the form of the reeds large, and that should complete the scene. It's adding a little bit more depth and creating a little bit more distance within the scene. It stabilizes the bottom, gives the bottom a little bit more visual weight for the bottom half of the scene. And there you have it. A pretty crazy surface, but kind of tamed for the use of our scenic stamping needs. Hope you enjoyed the card. Thanks so much for watching.